Hello, we are live. I'm John Porter from TechRadar, and I'm joined by Andrew London from TechRadar.
Hello.
I am the home technology writer on the UK side of the team, and Andrew London is a staff writer. So today we are come here to talk about the Xbox One X. It's the upcoming console from Microsoft, and it's finally going to deliver on that promise of true native 4K gaming on a console. Now, of course, 4K gaming, some might argue, is not entirely a new thing. You know, if you have a PC that's powerful enough, you've been able to set the graphics up to 4K for some time now. But with the Xbox One X, it's the first time it's coming in native form to a console. Now, the reason I'm joined by Andrew is, Andrew, you were at a recent Xbox One X event.
I was indeed.
You were playing with what is presumably the final console, right?
Yeah, and so a lot of the games were still in, some were still in betas and some were in alphas, but like it was the final console. Exactly.
Yeah, so you could see the console sitting underneath the TV. There was no trickery going on. They weren't like leading away the cables to a hamster running furiously in a wheel.
No, it was definitely a console.
Cool. That sounds very good. So I mean, like, what was your like overall impression of how stuff looks on the new machine?
Pretty incredible.
Okay.
Like, I was quite amazed by it, actually, that there were quite a few games. So you'll know now, well, you might not know, but there's been a lot of games that they're saying are coming out with the Xbox One X, and so there's now 130 games, including enhanced titles, and so some of the older titles that have been enhanced. And so I was there going, how much like are they really going to have changed? And there were some, like Rise of the Tomb Raider, which I genuinely thought was beautiful, like actually stunning to look at. And they're going, oh, okay, so it really is a leap.
Yeah, I mean, like, certainly it's the talking about anything to do with the Xbox One X is super weird, because you tend to watch trailers through YouTube, through TV, and all of this stuff is really maxing out at like 1080p, even if you've got like a 4K TV. Yeah. So like, there was a moment when I was back at E3 and they showed off a few demos. So I didn't touch the console myself, but I had some demos like played in front of me and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And it was remarkable when you kind of see it on a consumer TV for the first time, a consumer 4K TV, just like how much of a difference that 4K makes.
Yeah, and also HDR. Like, it's a thing that is quite hard to sum up. So it's kind of like when Blu-ray first came along, and there were all of the VHSs saying like, look at how incredible Blu-ray is going to be. But in order to make it seem like it was that incredible, they basically had to show you a worse version and a better version. But the better version wasn't as good as Blu-ray was going to be, because it wasn't capable of it, because it was a VHS. And so all of the things at the moment that are like, this is what HDR is capable of, isn't really showing you HDR, because it's not an HDR broadcast. It's not coming through an HDR screen. So when you actually sit down with a game that is in HDR, it's incredible.
Yeah. And I think, like, I mean, it's the same problem the 3DS had as well, right? We had all those Nintendo adverts where they're kind of going, like, Mario's jumping out the screen. They're like, oh, no, it's so 3D. But you're like, but this looks ridiculous to me, because I'm, like, watching it on a 2D screen, right? Yeah. So you mentioned, like, a couple of games. So were there any kind of, like, particular moments in certain games that you were like, okay, like, this is where, like, 4K HDR, like, really makes a difference? Or was it a kind of more overall sort of thing?
It was a more overall sort of thing. So I did already mention Rise of the Tomb Raider, but there was a particular moment where I was like, okay, that's the true power of HDR. So HDR, just to quickly sum up, high dynamic range, and so you get a broader spectrum of contrast, colour, and so you can see detail in dark elements of the screen at the same time as seeing details in the lighter elements of the screen, and it's basically just, it's a more complex, more sophisticated image. And there was this moment where Lara was going through a really dark cave, and she had her blue glow stick, and it was reflecting off the cave walls, and then came out into this beautifully lit up, like dilapidated tomb, and it was just stunning. And they're going, this is what it's about.
Yeah.
And like playing Shadow of War.
Yes.
Which is Middle-earth Shadow of War, and so it is the Tolkien world. It's orcs and battle, and it's muddy and it's grimy, and there's fire and sword play and everything, and just the sheer amount of detail is incredible. That actually, you kind of, a lot of the time you don't notice how detail is lacking from things until you see something that's got incredible detail. You go, oh, this is what it could have looked like all that time.
I think like so. I had a moment when I was watching a demo for Forza Horizon, Forza Motorsport 7.
Yeah.
Forza Horizon 3 is also getting a patch, but Forza Motorsport 7 is the new one. It's it feels like it's been built more from the ground up to take advantage of the X.
Yeah.
And they were kind of doing this race and stuff, and it looked really good and stuff. But you're looking at it going, it looks very similar. You know, like the lines are slightly crisper, but like ultimately we were watching. It must have been a 65-inch TV, and we were sitting about like 7 feet away or so. So a lot of that 4K detailing is lost. But you're like, oh, okay, it looks fine. And then we like turned the corner at the end of the race, and the sun was just cresting. And like the clouds were clearing slightly, and so you got that like HDR brightness of the sun coming through the clouds, and it was that moment of like you hadn't realised that you hadn't seen anything that bright, but the fact that TV can do it, it was kind of like, whoa, geez.
Yeah.
And I think like that's when HDR is done well. When HDR is done badly, the screen looks incredibly bright and incredibly dark, and you're kind of like, just feels like it's like showing off in a really crude way exactly what HDR can do.
Yeah.
The nicer moments are when it's kind of like it looks normal and stuff, but then there is something really bright, and you're kind of like squinting slightly, and it's just taking advantage of the fact that this part of the screen can go so bright, whilst the rest of the screen is more or less unaffected.
Yeah.
By the way, thank you so much for everyone in the comments. I'm just going to do a quick shout out to everyone in here. I'm just going to scroll right up to the top. We've got Shibster88. We have BMD Shred77. Hello. Mitchell Hang, nice to see you. Kunal Ramtek, great to see you too, good sir. Scrolling through again, we've got Varund Govind, who is saying he won't be buying an Xbox One X before 2019.
Okay.
Fair enough. We'll get into some criticisms in a little bit, so stick around to have a listen to that. Anil Panchal, also around here talking about why there are lots of Indians watching. Apparently it is a good time in India to be watching a live stream, and I quite agree. But hello. Oh, and a couple more people saying hi. We've got Nicodem Zagael. I'm so sorry if I've said that incorrectly. Hello, really good to see you. Medhi Makbul, hi as well. And Rahul D, thinking Ghost P. Fair enough.
Cool.
Cool. So a couple of other things I want to talk about in terms of like the TV tech. So for those that don't know me, and that's fair enough if you don't, I cover a lot of the TV and audio stuff on TechRadar, so I really do like my TV tech. And what's interesting, of course, there's the HDR. They're not going down the Dolby Vision route. Mm-hmm. Dolby Vision is a kind of like enhanced form of HDR. It supports a greater color bit depth. And it also has kind of like a scene-by-scene tone mapping thing. It doesn't support that, but what it does support on the Dolby side is Dolby Atmos, right? Which is kind of enhanced form of surround sound. Now, normal surround sound is obviously like all the way around you. That way, Dolby Atmos kind of adds like a height element. And what you tend to find is, I mean, if you're in a really fancy screening room like Dolby's private cinema, they have like speakers in the ceiling and stuff. But what you normally have in a kind of home tech sense is you'll have a soundbar with a couple of upward firing speakers, and that kind of like fires sound up and it hits the ceiling, and then it comes right into your ear holes and penetrates your brain that way. And Dolby Atmos is included in the Xbox One X. It's also included, importantly, in the Xbox One S. So if you want really good sound, the Xbox One X isn't... You don't need to upgrade to get it, right? So, did you have any demos that showed off the Atmos stuff, or is that something they didn't focus on?
Yeah, so Gears of War did. Yeah. And yeah, it was with headphones.
Yep.
And so you're there going, yes.
Yeah, very good.
I can hear the things, they are around me.
It's another thing you don't notice until it kind of happens, right? And I think the thing with surround sound is it's gotten very good, and I think in a similar way to the way that if you look at a good enough TV, the image almost looks 3D because it has that much depth to it, even though it's a 2D TV.
Yeah.
I think if surround sound is done well enough, your brain starts to believe it's like above and above you as well, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing with Gears of War, that the demo kind of... It was obvious with all of the things that I played that they had chosen the specific bits that really hammered home the improvements that they'd made. And so you spend a few minutes just preparing yourself for the onslaught that's about to begin, and then just something flies overhead and troops start appearing, and you're like, oh, it's happening! And yeah, there is just that moment where there's the tension building where you're just going, oh, I'm making a thing and I'm putting that down. And where should I put my spikes? And so it almost verges on the mundane, where you're like, I'm just doing a thing, and then the happens above you, like,
That's pretty. Like the moment I had as well was like it very similar. Like in Gears of War, kind of like fighting along. You're like blah blah, like get all the guys on the ground, and then you kind of hear this helicopter, and you're like, oh, that's weird. That helicopter, and then you like look up and you see this helicopter like veering over you, and it's just like it's again, it's like. It's another thing that like adds like an extra element to it.
Yeah.
Whether I would buy an entirely new piece of hardware to get it though, I quite like the fact that this is included in the Xbox One S because I feel like it's another kind of element that like it's a nice to have, but I wouldn't buy a whole other piece of hardware for it. I don't know if you feel differently. You're kind of you're putting a face as though you might be tempted.
No, I'm sorry, I'm kind of thinking ahead to whether or not the visual elements are something that you would definitely consider buying
we will absolutely get into that later. I mean, if any of you guys have any comments about if you're preparing to actually buy an Xbox One X for yourself, absolutely chuck them in the comments, along with any questions you might have. We're going to be just like, as our conclusion, we're going to be talking about whether we at the moment think that we're going to buy a console. Obviously, final console isn't out yet. I should point out this lovely device that that Andrew has his hand on at the moment is not a finished unit. This is a dummy unit. We cannot plug this into anything. However, we thought, it would just be nice to have to kind of show off what the console looks like in all its glory.
Holding it tenderly.
Yeah. Anyway, what were we talking about? We were talking about Atmos. I mean, like, Gears of War is nice. I'm really looking forward to PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds coming out on the X.
Of course
they have. It's just so good. And they have not confirmed yet whether it's getting Dolby Atmos, at least as far as I know. But I think that that's like a game that, like, of any game would benefit so much from Atmos, because so much of that game is about like not encountering enemies for ages and ages and ages, and like about using all of your senses to try and like find out where they might be. And of course, there's so much like indoor action that happens. You go into a building, you suddenly hear footsteps, and you're like, where was that thing? And just like having that verticality in the audio would be super cool in a game like that. Where like, it's actually important from a gameplay standpoint as opposed to just like a nice to have. Although then it raises an interesting question, like, are those with Atmos going to have an advantage over those without Atmos in a game like that?
Probably.
Yeah. And that's probably true. I mean, in a similar way, I definitely find when I'm playing Battlegrounds on the PC at the moment, I've got like a tiny like 1080p monitor, and I really wish I had like more resolution, because so much of it is spotting guys that are far away and stuff. So like Xbox One X players playing against Xbox One S owners potentially might have an advantage because they're rendering at a higher resolution, they can see more, and like it might unbalance the playing field a little bit. I'm just going to jump into the comments real quick, see if we've got any interesting comments we can respond to. Video quality is good, says Rahul D. Thank you so much. We have been tinkering every week to try and make it as good as possible, so it's really good that it's coming through well. Grandeel has posted the comment PC Master Race and has asked, can Xbox play Star Citizen? Oh wait, no it can't. I'd argue, Grandeel, that on the PC you can't really play Star Citizen either yet, because it's only out in a kind of beta form. But no, I mean, to be honest, it is a really good point. Like, so much of this stuff the Xbox One X is doing is available on the PC. Atmos, it's available on PC for certain games. If you play Overwatch on PC, you can absolutely play in Atmos. If you want to play in 4K, if you pay enough for like a decent PC, you can absolutely like play it in 4K. But the Xbox One X is doing it a lot cheaper in terms of the hardware. Now, I know what your response will be, hang on, games are cheaper on PC. And that's like absolutely true. But I think for a lot of people, they don't have a lot of money up front, and they will have money kind of like consistently over time. And so potentially the console model of like spending works better for them. But if the PC model of like paying a lot up front and then like not paying that much from month to month works for you, like, absolutely, that sounds perfect. Really interestingly, in terms of the mouse and keyboard thing, so I know that's another, like, I definitely prefer mouse and keyboard for playing shooters. I prefer gamepads for, like, platformers and that sort of stuff. But Mike Ibarra at a recent talk did seem to confirm that mouse and keyboard support is coming to the X, which is really interesting.
It is interesting.
But, of course, then people tend to use like consoles while sitting on the sofa. So does that work with mouse and keyboard? I don't know. Hope you're satisfied with that response, Grandeel. But like, everyone's entitled to their own preferences and their own opinions and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Legacy Hit says PS4 better. And I think that's like something that might be an interesting thing to discuss. So you have used a PS4 presumably. Where do you stand on the PS4 versus Xbox One conundrum?
It's a difficult one for me because I am a PlayStation player through and through, and so have been since the very beginning.
Yeah.
And so my heart will always kind of be with the PlayStation.
Yeah.
And I have played the PS4, but not the PS4 Pro, and I've played the Xbox One X, but not the Xbox One X.
Oh,
so,
no.
Yeah, so actually I've used the better of the two of the Microsoft consoles. And so in terms of visuals and frame rate and gameplay and all of those things, the Xbox takes it. Because I've been playing with the better console.
Yeah, that's fair enough. It's not really a fair comparison at all, is it?
Yeah, no.
So I mean, the PS4 versus Xbox One thing has it's such a kind of complicated thing because there are so many different like elements to it, and like probably like at the end of the day, it comes down to what games do you prefer. And if you like a game like Uncharted, you're only going to get that on PlayStation. But whereas if you're like obsessed with PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, as someone in the office is at the moment, then like the Xbox is the only. Well, no, that's another like can of worms. Xbox is getting it first, but it may or may not be coming to PS4 later on. Yeah. So, those exclusive things. But then, in terms of the interface, speaking on a personal level, I've always preferred the PlayStation's interface. It's so clean, it's so quick to get to what you want to get to. And like in comparison, the Xbox interface, there's so much stuff going on. There are a lot of adverts on that home screen. I think Microsoft are updating their user interface for the new version. I haven't played around with that updated version yet, unfortunately. But from a usability point of view, I personally prefer the PS4 at the moment. The
controller, though, like I know it's a conversation as old as time, but the controller on the Xbox is better. And like, As a PlayStation fan, it pains me to say that, but I don't think the PlayStation controllers are as good.
What do you like more about the Xbox controller?
It just feels like it sits more intuitively in the hand, and all of the everything that you want to be, everything you. Can I do hand mime and not hold that and not fall off? That's the question. That like the triggers are where you want them to be, the controls are where you want them to be. Everything just sits right in your hand, and I think even with the new PS4 controllers, they still haven't quite got it.
That's fair. I really like I feel like with the PS4 they introduced that touchpad. I feel like it's not really been used that well. It's quite nice for using a PS4 controller on PC where that kind of like emulates the mouse and stuff. That's really handy. But yeah, I agree with you on that. And then Xbox has the nice individual vibrator. Individual vibration in each of the two triggers at the back, which is really nice, especially in racing games where you kind of like playing Forza Horizon 3, you feel your car start to spit out if you're braking too hard, and you feel that resistance in the left-hand trigger. I really love that as well. Go on. One
thing that the PlayStation has, hands down, that the Xbox doesn't have, PSVR.
Yes, that's true. So that's something we definitely want to get into. You did an interview with Albert Pinello from Microsoft about VR on the Xbox. So for those of you that haven't been following this stuff, back at E3 2016, Microsoft said, hey, we've got this great thing. It's called Project Scorpio. Later was renamed the Xbox One X. And they said, it'll do 4K. It'll have all this stuff. It'll be absolutely amazing. Oh, yeah, and of course, it'll do VR as well. This was back before Sony released the PlayStation VR. And since then... nothing. They haven't shown anything off. They haven't really said that much more other than to say the mixed reality headsets that are coming to Windows 10 will be coming to Xbox One X in 2018. So you sat down with Albert Pinello at the Microsoft event. What did he say? What did he have to say for himself?
Practically nothing.
That's really a shame.
And so I was like, okay, cool. So amazing all of the stuff that you've done with this. So where's Xbox VR? And he was just like... well, we'll answer that question when it comes to it, but at the moment we're focused on the X. And I was like, okay, cool, but are we talking like next console? Are we talking in a year's time? He was just like, that's a great question. I was like, okay, cool. I guess we're not getting an answer to that then.
It's just, I like from I guess my perspective, it feels like interest in VR is cooling off a little bit. That like, you know, at E3 2016 you had like people doing demos on stage. You had like Ubisoft like bringing people on stage and go like, gotta play this VR stuff live in front of an audience. E3 2017 there were a couple of cool VR announcements. We got like Doom VR and like Fallout VR got an release date, and Skyrim VR and stuff. And then Ubisoft showed off a thing with Elijah Wood, and who knows what's going on there. But there wasn't that same like, VR is coming, like let's get ready. It was a kind of like, we know that people want some VR stuff, so here it is. But it didn't feel like anyone was making it their focus. Even Sony, who'd released the PlayStation VR like just 6 months prior to E3, they had like a 2-minute trailer in their show about it, and it didn't sound like a company that's super confident about VR as a thing.
But it's not as if they haven't sold any headsets.
No, that's true. They've sold a lot. Like it was, they sold like 1 million by like March or something.
Yeah.
So they've. I just don't know. I like it. Like E3 did a lot to undermine my faith in VR at the moment, despite the fact that it's still really cool. Like there's no VR thing that I've kind of used and gone like, oh no, it's bad.
But that's the thing. Like, do you think that part of it is that VR is amazing to experience but looks a bit weird to watch? Like, whenever you see somebody, like there are loads of adverts around at the moment of like weird geeky guy with his VR headset on, and it's like, it is kind of that thing that it's similar to what we were talking about earlier, that you can't really demonstrate what it is on something that isn't that device. So there is absolutely no way of us going, this is what VR looks like, unless you have a VR headset. And so having a VR headset on is incredible.
Yeah, it's amazing.
But until you've actually experienced it, it doesn't really mean anything to you.
Yeah, and every single person I've put a VR headset on has gone like, oh, I get it now. I understand what this is supposed to be.
Yeah.
But there's like something like the Gear VR, which is like impressive in its own right. You know, like what they're able to do with a mobile phone is impressive.
Yeah.
But people look at that and they go like, oh, okay, so it's just a thing where you like turn your head and then it turns the thing, and you're like, no, because like real VR is like you're moving through a space and it feels like you've got this like little cube that you can walk through.
Yeah.
But but either way, it's a shame that Microsoft, it doesn't feel like they're walking back on it.
Yeah.
It just feels like they haven't worked out what they want it to be on the console yet.
Yeah. I mean, maybe they are just doing what we're doing. They're seeing that it's not as hot as it was, and so are waiting to take the lay of the land.
Yeah, and that's absolutely fair enough. I'm going to jump back into the comments. We have our favourite commenter, the British Unknown.
Hello.
Joined us again for another live stream. The British Unknown says, hello, I'm here. I'll never miss a live stream. British Unknown, great to see you, man. Always love having you along for the ride.
Or woman, do we know?
Oh, that's a very good question.
Anyway.
I'm terribly sorry for making that assumption. Yeah. So, were you able to play the new Assassin's Creed game?
I was not able to play the new Assassin's Creed game.
That's really unfortunate because Saumya Kim Saria, I'm so sorry if I've pronounced that incorrectly, has asked thoughts on the new Assassin's Creed.
Oh, so I have thoughts on it. So basically,
haven't touched it, but of course I have ideas.
No, so basically the reason that I didn't play it is because at this event there were 2 spaces where you could play Assassin's Creed, and every time I went to it they were taken, and I was like, okay, so I've got the choice. I can either stand here and wait for it to be free and potentially not play other things, or I can risk it and try and get my time with it. And it just didn't work out. But I did spend some time stood whilst other people were playing, so I have been able to look at it, and it does look incredible. Like, I'm kind of one of these people that I love Assassin's Creed games, but I kind of think they're all the same game. But if you like that game, you're in for a treat. Like, it's everything that Assassin's Creed always is, but it looks incredibly stunning. And so
I think that the improvements to the combat, I think, make it more interesting than a normal one.
Yeah.
But then Assassin's Creed has kind of turned into FIFA at a certain point. Like, every year they go, like, this is the thing we're improving. And so, like, each part of it is, like, incrementally, like, getting better and better and better and better.
Yeah.
But, like, there's rarely a, like, oh, the whole game has been, like, reinvented.
Yeah, I think that's what I mean. That it's not a seismic shift. That it's essentially another Assassin's Creed, which they're great. So, cool.
Sounds perfect. The Gaming Snake asks, do you guys really have an Xbox One X? This is a it's a dummy unit. So Microsoft very kindly sent this thing out so we could take some nice photographs of it, but it does not have the fancy CPU and GPU inside of it that gives the 4K HDR goodness, but was just here just so you can see what it looks like. So Grandeel has said, oh nice, I got burned. Mate, you did not get burned. You made a very good point. However, I just have a different opinion.
Yeah.
To you. We have...
okay.
Oh my god, it's just all skipped around. I've lost my place.
Are you doing hold music?
I am doing hold music. Oh, there's a lot of chat going on in the comments.
Yeah.
I've actually lost my place.
Awesome.
I'm gonna go down. Oh man, some people talking about our controller comparisons earlier on. So I've skipped a bunch of comments. I'm really sorry that we don't read out every single one of your comments. Samya Kimsaria says, "Call me Sam." Will do. If you ever are in the comments again, I will definitely do that. Anil Panchal asks GTA 6.
Mm-hmm.
No announcement yet on GTA 6. I would love to see a GTA 6. I loved GTA 5. I love GTA 5 Online. I think I've played it through now only twice, actually. So I played it through once on PS3, and then it came out again on PC. Played it through again on PC. Absolutely stunning game. We have to assume it's in development. I've got my fingers crossed for a Vice City setting, because they tend to do only the 3 locations and they roll through them.
Yeah.
I mean, also I'd love a GTA London. But then of course we got a guy modding GTA 5 to mod in London, so
yeah,
hopefully that will kind of fill that need.
And
I'm really excited for GTA 6.
I just want Rockstar to put all of their effort into making Red Dead 2. I just want them to not be focusing on anything else, because I want my Red Dead 2.
Red Dead 2.
Fair enough.
The British Unknown has clarified the point on his gender. Their gender, sorry.
Yeah.
The British Unknown says he identified... They... This is really hard.
Yep.
The British Unknown says, I identify as an Apache attack helicopter.
Awesome.
Not really, I'm a man.
Okay.
That's good. In future, I will refer to you exclusively as an Apache attack helicopter, the British Unknown.
Always searching for a gender-neutral pronoun. Now we have one. So thanks.
He's just a helicopter. Sri Harry has asked for a shout out. Hey, how are you doing? And I'm gonna just leave the comments for a moment, because we have another topic to discuss.
Yep.
Which is, of course, Xbox One X enhanced games. What is that all about? What does it mean?
Yeah, so this is a thing that when Microsoft came out and was like, there are all of these games,
yeah,
and you're like, okay, that feels like a very definite flag in the ground. Just going, most of the time consoles come out and they've got 1 or 2 games, and you have to be an early adopter and really want to get on board, but there's nothing really good for you.
Exactly. You sit there and you go, I'm going to play MotorStorm over and over again.
Yeah.
This is fine.
Yeah, when all the good games come out in a year, I'm going to be laughing. And so clearly what Microsoft's done is they've gone, it's not going to be that situation. There's going to be all of these games. And so I was at this event and I was like, okay, cool. And they started by saying that the developers can pick and choose what they want to enhance to make something Xbox One X enhanced. And instantly, little alarm bells went off. And I was like, but does that mean that they could just go, yeah, that blade of grass is a different green, and then call it Xbox One X Enhanced? And so in that interview with Albert Pinello that we were talking about earlier, I said to him, I was like, are there any minimum requirements?
Yes.
And he basically said that there weren't, but that's not something that you should necessarily be worrying about. That automatically, whether or not games are enhanced or not, they're going to look better on the X.
Yes.
Which is already cool. But what he was saying is that Xbox One X Enhanced basically means that something has been done to the game. And so that can mean HDR, that can mean 4K, that can mean improved frame rate, that can be Dolby Atmos sound.
Even though Dolby Atmos sound is available on the S.
Yes. But anyway. And then they have to have made some changes. And so some games have done a fairly significant overhaul of the game in order to actually kind of make it a new game. That there are new elements to the game that weren't there previously, and others have just done a bit of a polish. And so it's kind of going to be up to you as a consumer, when you choose which games you buy, to do a bit of research and figure out what they actually have done and whether it's worth getting the new game. So I've spoken about it probably too much already, but Rise of the Tomb Raider, that game, that's one that I definitely think is worth getting in its enhanced version. And whether that will be true of all of them, I don't know, but he was basically saying that my fear of the one blade of grass thing is kind of unfounded. That the amount of work it would take to become enhanced, it would be easier just to do the work than to
try and fake it.
Than to fake it and pretend.
It's like the moon landings. You're like, at a certain point, it is easier to go to the moon.
Yeah.
But that's probably going to be a controversial statement on YouTube. We just had a really good question here. Not actually about the Xbox One X, but it's from Grandeal again, asking, what's your opinion on the accidental crossplay between Xbox and PS4? PUBG on PSE and Xbox crossplay. You choose which one to answer. Okay. So, for those of you that aren't familiar, there's been a lot of chat recently about. Feel free to chuck that horizontal if holding it upright has been too much of a stretch. A lot of chat recently about crossplay between Xbox and PS4 because although we kind of have our different sides and we plant different flags, ultimately we're all gamers. We all are part of this amazing big family. And so it'd be great if PS4 players, if you're playing Call of Duty on the PS4, if you could just play against Xbox players, that would be amazing. Now Microsoft has been really kind of open with embracing this. Minecraft is probably the biggest attempt recently where every single platform of Minecraft with a patch that I think is yet to come out will be able to play against each other, whether you're playing on the Switch or your Android phone or your iOS or your PC or your Xbox. You can all play in the same world together, which is really great. The one person that isn't doing this is Sony, and they've given a bunch of reasons, but I think reading between the lines, the reason is they have the biggest platform at the moment. They know that people buy PS4s because they know it's the biggest platform. They have the biggest amount of online players to play with, and so they don't want to give up that home advantage that they have at the moment. Now recently, a game called Fortnite, which is produced by Epic Games, kind of accidentally enabled crossplay between PS4 and Xbox One, which is absolutely ridiculous. Their statement is it's accidental. My personal feeling is that there is no way that could be accidental. That would be crazy. So
some intern just going, what does this switch do?
Oh God!
I've just turned on crossplay.
It's just crazy. But I think the interesting thing about that is that our own Emma Boyle, when she was at Gamescom, she interviewed the head of Epic, who I cannot remember the name from the life of me, and he said that when it comes to crossplay, he thinks there's a bit of Game of Thrones going on there, which, and by what he means there is he's basically saying some people are kind of playing some games. They're not being entirely clear with what the situation is. So it's very funny that his company would somehow get this debate going again about whether you can play crossplay PS4 versus Xbox. You've spoken there about PUBG, or Xbox versus PC. Of course, the really interesting thing there is a lot of people on PC.
Oh, someone did ask about it. You're talking about PUBG again.
This is the grand deal. Who's been posting some really great questions in the comments. Keep them coming. Between Xbox and PC, which I think would be really cool, but only if you can have people playing with mouse and keyboard on Xbox. Mouse and keyboard is always gonna beat controller every single time. It's just quicker. But I think the interesting point there, I was talking to Cliff Bleszinski at E3, and I kind of asked him this question. I was like, do you think crossplay is a good thing? And he basically said that when you're doing controller versus mouse and keyboard, it's not going to be a good experience for people playing with controllers. And at a certain point, it's not going to be a good experience for people using mouse and keyboard as well, because it'd just be too easy and not that fun. But he said that what he'd like to do would be to make a game with different classes, and you have the big, tanky, slow-moving classes, and those are controlled with controllers. And you have the small, nippy, kind of tracer-style classes played by people with mouse and keyboard controls. And he said that theoretically, he did not in any way confirm that this is what he was actually going to do. He said theoretically, this is how he would approach that problem of crossplay. But that's a really great question, Grandiel. Thank you so much for facilitating me monologuing for 5 minutes there. So we're going to actually wrap this up quite soon now, because I think we've kind of been speaking for far too long on this topic. Thank you so much to everyone in the comments. Thank you so much to the Grandiel. Thank you so much to the British Unknown. Sam, you've been great. Varun, Govind, I'm so sorry we didn't get to your questions. We will try to get to them at a later point. We do read every single comment that you guys post, and it's absolutely lovely to see you discussing them down there. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us. I've been John Porter.
I've been Andrew.
And see you again next time.
Thanks.